The other member of the panel is Cindy Galvo. She's Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. We introduced Luce already. And our other Assistant Superintendent will be talking about the collective bargaining agreement. That's Bill Perry. Bill?
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to stand up. We thought it would be helpful tonight to just give a quick overview of the negotiations process in the school district, also called collective bargaining. We've had a couple of requests from people who aren't really familiar with what the process is to have a little bit more knowledge and information about it. And so hopefully this will be helpful for you tonight, and I'll be happy to answer questions that you might have. Collective bargaining began in California in the year 1975 with legislation called the ROTA Act, and that's what instituted the collective bargaining process. We in Pleasanton have two employee associations. One is for our classified employees, which is CSEA, California School Employees Association. Those are our custodial staff, secretaries, and non-certificated employees. Our other employee association is called APT, which is the Association of Pleasanton Teachers. And that is our teachers, reading specialists, counselors, all people who require a credential to do their work in the state of California. As the ROTA Act was signed in, it created the Educational Employment Relations Act, which oversees collective bargaining in California, and also created an agency called PURB, which is the Public Employment Relations Board. We love our acronyms in education. And PURB is the state agency that oversees bargaining as well. Next slide. The purpose of the EERA is stated here: to promote the improvement of personnel management and employer-employee relations within the public school systems. And there are just certain delineated areas that are bargainable in the school district, and you see behind me those three areas. They are wages, hours of employment, and then terms and conditions of employment. It's that third one in particular that is open to interpretation in terms of what is a term and condition of employment. But some of the things that have fallen under this include health and welfare benefits, not hours of employment, but health and welfare benefits, obviously salaries under the wages, and even items such as curriculum issues that could impact an employee's hours of work could fall under the terms of employment. The steps in the process. Before you begin bargaining, you have to do what's called sunshining. And so you actually put out on the table what are some of the articles of the contract that you're planning on discussing at the bargaining table. Now this is kind of interesting because one of the things that both the employee association and the management team have to be careful about is that you're not allowed to bargain away from the table, meaning that the actual specific proposals that you bring to one another are to be discussed at the bargaining table in good faith with both the teams participating. So when we sunshine, we talk about which contract articles we wish to open and talk about at the table, but those actual specific discussions take place at the bargaining table. So again, more steps in the process. Negotiating in good faith is an expectation. In other words, you come to the table ready to listen and to negotiate your proposals, and also to be willing to listen and at times compromise with the other side as well. If you can, you enter a tentative agreement, which is signed off at the table and then is brought to each of the different groups. For the management team, it comes to the school board for ratification, and for the union, they bring it to their membership for a vote. As long as the board approves it and the union ratifies it, then it becomes a part of your contract. Now, as you're negotiating, sometimes you're making changes and sometimes you're maintaining the status quo of the contract. Obviously, I'll just put it out here right now. One of the reasons we're talking about this tonight is because as the budget has worsened over the last couple of years, and as we hear from the community and we look up and down the state, we see in fact that there are many different ideas for trying to solve the budget problems. Some people have talked about shortening the school day, And in fact, the legislature now has allowed us to shorten the school, I should say actually school year, by 5 instructional days. There's talk of whether or not to freeze our step and column increases for employees. There's suggestions that are made about whether or not we should impose salary reductions for all of our units, be it management, classified, or certificated. And I would just say that, well, again, we need to do the negotiations at the table. Given the seriousness of the budget, I would just suggest that all bargaining units, whether in Pleasanton or around the entire state, need to consider and look at and explore all options for budget savings. And I certainly can assure you that we understand with the gravity of our situation that we're going to need to have those discussions at the table. But again, I just want to emphasize that those discussions have to take place at the table. They have to be negotiated in good faith, and there's not a way to predict exactly what the outcome will be until you have those discussions. Now, if in a situation that you cannot reach a tentative agreement, and you've been meeting in good faith and you just cannot come to agreement on certain issues or all issues, then the next step that would happen would be that impasse would be declared. That could be declared either by one side or by both sides, and essentially saying we cannot reach an agreement in our negotiations. Once that happens, then PERB steps in, again, the Public Employment Relations Board, and PERB is going to then appoint a neutral mediator. The job of that mediator is to try to get the two sides to come to agreement. They sit down at the table and they literally mediate, and they will keep you as long as they think it's worth the time and effort to try to bring the two sides to agreement and to come to a tentative agreement. If they still can't come to agreement, then the mediator has the power to release the sides to what's called fact-finding. And fact-finding is a 3-member panel. So one of the members is picked by the management team, one member will be picked by the employee association team, and then they either mutually agree upon a 3rd member to take part, or if they can't come to agreement, then the per panel and mediator will appoint a 3rd-party neutral. That fact-finding group then asks you to bring forward statistics, information about the district and the finances of the district, and the fact-finding panel eventually will prepare a recommended advisory settlement contract. And then, as we're getting near the end of this process that can occur, either the parties can accept the fact-finding recommendation, or if the board of the district does not accept that, then the district does have the option of imposing what's called last, best, and final offer, and actually imposing that so that becomes, at that point in time, the contract that the employees are working under. And it's only after all that's happened that the union then has the ability to call their members together and vote on whether or not to engage in a strike. That did happen in Pleasanton once. For those who've been here a while, way back in the late 80s, there was a strike in Pleasanton. That was the last time that happened here. It's a very difficult process to go through, obviously, and I need to tell you that. And it's been probably a good thing, certainly from my point of view, a good thing that since we had the strike in the late 80s, the district and the employee unions have attempted to work together in a more conciliatory sort of a fashion and come to agreements that were mutually agreeable. The vast majority of districts settle before impasse is ever declared. It's actually a fairly rare step, although to be honest, in this day and age and in this budget climate, we will probably see more districts that are moving to impasse. The vast majority of those who do go to impasse will then settle in mediation. And a very small percentage will go to fact-finding, and an even smaller percentage will finally go to implementation or strike. So historically speaking, it's been fairly rare for districts and their unions to get into that fact-finding and strike mode. Negotiations has a pretty pervasive impact on the school district. it really is all about relationships, and I won't read all the bullet points there, but certainly the way negotiations are going can certainly influence whether you have a positive or negative relationship between your school board, your administrators, your teachers, your classified units, and it certainly cause a lot of divisiveness if things aren't going well within the community as a whole. So it's a very important part of what we do in school districts, and again, just thought it would be helpful if you had a little overview of that, and be happy to answer questions that you might have.